You know, some wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who are supposed to love you the most. I never thought I'd hear my own sister, my flesh and blood, call me a failure at the one place I thought I'd find peace, our mother's funeral. Yes, you heard that right. While I was standing by Mom's casket, barely holding myself together, my sister leaned in with her glass of champagne during the reception and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mom's gone." And she died knowing her eldest daughter never achieved anything in life. People gasped. Some gave me pity looks. Others tried to laugh it off. And me, I just stood there frozen, my heart breaking in slow motion. But what my sister didn't know, what none of them knew, was that within the hour, her world was about to collapse. Because when the lawyer opened Mom's will, the name he read wasn't hers, it was mine. That's where my story begins. But to understand how I got here, humiliated by my own family, only to rise from the ashes, you need to know everything that led up to that funeral. My name is Clara. I was the firstborn daughter in a family that never let me forget that being first didn't mean being the favorite. My sister Emma came 2 years after me. And from the moment she arrived, it was like the sun rose and set with her. She was the golden child, the pretty one, the smart one, the talented one. At least that's how everyone told it. I was the opposite, the quiet one, the awkward one, the one who didn't live up to her potential. At school, I was bullied. At home, I was overlooked. And when Emma achieved anything, be it a spelling bee trophy or later a job promotion, our parents showered her with praise, while I got the recycled backhanded compliments like, "Well, at least you tried, Clara. It hurt." Oh, it hurt more than I can explain, but the funeral was the breaking point. That was the day all their lies came undone. Growing up, I learned very quickly that love in my family wasn't unconditional. It was earned. And no matter how hard I tried, I could never earn enough of it. I still remember being 6 years old, holding up my drawing of a house and stick figures. Me, Mom, Dad, and Emma. I had colored the whole page with crayons until my little fingers hurt. I was so proud. Mom looked at it, smiled politely, and said, "That's nice, Clara, but look at Emma's." And there Emma was, holding a perfectly neat painting with watercolors Dad had bought her specially. Everyone gathered around her, clapping, telling her how talented she was. My drawing? It ended up in the trash. That was my life in a nutshell. By middle school, Emma was excelling in sports, getting medals and trophies. Every wall in our house was lined with her awards. My achievements? If I brought home a B+ or a participation certificate, the best I got was, "Well, Clara, maybe one day you'll be as good as your sister." Do you know what that does to a child's heart? When you start to believe that no matter what you do, you'll always be second best. By high school, it wasn't even a competition anymore. Emma was the homecoming queen, the cheerleader, the star student. I was the awkward girl in oversized sweaters, hiding in the library because I couldn't stand the whispers in the hallway. Even at family gatherings, the comparisons never stopped. Oh, Emma got into the honor society. Clara, what are you doing again? Oh, Emma has a boyfriend. Clara, maybe someday someone will like you too. They said it with smiles, but those words cut deeper than any knife. But the breaking point came at Emma's wedding. God, I still get chills remembering it. I was in my early 20s. Fresh out of college, still figuring out life, working a small entry-level job to make ends meet. Nothing glamorous, but honest work. Emma, on the other hand, had just landed a corporate position at a big firm, and of course she was marrying her college sweetheart, tall, handsome, wealthy family. It was the fairy tale wedding, and I was the bridesmaid, the invisible one in the corner. The entire night, relatives whispered to each other, comparing us. I heard it over and over. Emma's such a catch. Poor Clara. She still hasn't figured herself out. And then during the toast, Emma herself looked straight at me and said, in front of everyone, "And to my dear sister Clara, don't worry, your time will come. Someday," people laughed. But I didn't. I smiled politely, clapped my hands, and excused myself to the restroom where I cried silently, wondering why my existence was always a punchline. What no one knew, not even Emma, was that I was quietly building something. Something that didn't look like success yet, but one day it would. I didn't know it then, but that someday Emma mocked me about would come sooner than she ever expected. And it would come on the darkest day of our lives, our mother's funeral. When Mom got sick, I thought maybe, just maybe, the family would finally look at me differently. You know? Like I was more than just the spare daughter. It started small. She was forgetting things, misplacing her keys, burning food on the stove. At first, everyone brushed it off as stress. But I knew. I could see the difference in her eyes when she struggled to recognize faces, or when she'd pause mid-sentence as if the words had fallen off a cliff in her mind. Alzheimer's. That was the diagnosis. Dad pretended it wasn't happening. Emma threw herself deeper into work, claiming she was too busy but would visit when she could. And me? I became the caretaker. I was the one taking her to doctor's appointments. I was the one cooking meals, labeling drawers with sticky notes so she'd remember where things were. I was the one holding her hand when she cried in confusion, begging to know why her brain was betraying her. Do you think anyone thanked me? Not once. Emma would breeze in once every few weeks with expensive flowers or a box of chocolates, post a smiling picture on Instagram with the caption, "Family time with Mom," then leave an hour later. Meanwhile, I was there night after night, cleaning up after accidents, sleeping on the couch just in case she wandered outside. I remember one night in particular. Mom was restless, pacing in her nightgown, whispering to herself. I followed her to the kitchen and she turned to me, her eyes wide, terrified. "Clara, I don't want to forget you." My throat tightened. I held her, rocking her gently like a child. "You won't, Mom," I whispered. "Not in here." And I placed her hand over her heart. That moment stayed with me, because deep down I knew Emma would never see it. She wasn't there for those moments. She was too busy chasing her perfect life. When the end came, it was quiet. I was the one sitting beside Mom's bed, holding her frail hand as her breathing slowed. I whispered over and over, "I love you, Mom. I'm right here." And when her last breath left her, I kissed her forehead through my tears. By the time Emma arrived, Mom was already gone. She stormed into the hospital room with her perfect hair and tailored coat, hugging Dad dramatically as if she'd lost the most precious person in her world. I stood in the corner, silent, exhausted, my eyes swollen from crying. Emma glanced at me and I swear I saw it. The tiniest smirk, like even in grief she had somehow won. The funeral came fast. Too fast. A blur of black dresses, murmured condolences, flowers, and hymns. I thought I was numb, until Emma's words cut through the noise like a knife. Right there, during the reception after the service, champagne glass in hand, her voice dripping with that same superiority I'd known my whole life. Mom died knowing one of her daughters was a success, and the other was still a failure. Heads turned. Some people gasped, and me? I froze. I wanted to scream, to shout, to tell the truth about all those nights I stayed awake for Mom, the sacrifices, the tears, the love. But instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and lowered my eyes. Emma thought she had humiliated me for the final time. But the universe has a cruel way of balancing scales. Because when the lawyer stepped forward with the will, the smirk faded from her lips. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in my sister's eyes. The room fell silent when the lawyer cleared his throat. He was a tall man in a dark suit, glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose, carrying a leather briefcase that seemed to hold the weight of 100 secrets. He tapped the microphone gently. "If I may have your attention," he said. "Mrs. Margaret Whitmore left behind a final will and testament. She requested it be read today, in the presence of her family." A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. Emma straightened her back, chin lifted high as if she already knew what was coming. Of course she thought everything would go to her. The golden child, the pride and joy, the one who made Mom proud. I sat in the back, my hands clenched tightly together, my stomach twisting. I wasn't expecting anything. I had made peace with being invisible in this family. The lawyer adjusted his papers. His voice was steady, professional. "To my husband, Richard Whitmore," he began, pausing. "I leave my collection of photographs and personal journals, with the hope that they remind you of the life we shared." Dad nodded stiffly, his expression unreadable. Then came the part everyone was waiting for. "To my daughter, Emma Whitmore." The lawyer's voice carried clearly through the hall. Emma's smile widened. She tilted her glass ever so slightly, ready for her grand victory. I leave my recipe books and heirloom jewelry. A murmur swept across the room. Emma blinked. Jewelry? Recipes? That was it? Her smile faltered for the first time. The lawyer didn't pause. He simply continued. And to my daughter, Clara Whitmore. Every eye turned toward me. My heart slammed against my ribs. I leave the entirety of my estate, my savings, and all properties, amounting to $3.4 million, as well as guardianship over the Whitmore Family Foundation. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers. A few people even shouted. Emma's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. What? She cried out, her voice cracking. That's not possible. There has to be a mistake. The lawyer calmly adjusted his glasses. There is no mistake. Mrs. Whitmore was very clear. She wished for Clara to inherit the estate in its entirety. I sat frozen, unable to process the words. Me? $3.4 million? The estate? The foundation? Emma, on the other hand, was unraveling in real time. She didn't mean that. Emma screamed, her face flushed red. She was sick. She didn't know what she was doing. Everyone knows I was the one who... The lawyer cut her off smoothly. Mrs. Whitmore made this will 2 years ago. It was legally notarized and witnessed. At that time, she was of sound mind, 2 years ago. That was around the time I had started caring for her every day. The time Emma had stopped showing up, it hit me like a tidal wave. Mom knew. She saw who was really there for her, and in her final act, she made sure I was finally seen. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Tears stung my eyes, but not from sadness, from validation. For the first time in my life, Mom had chosen me. Emma lunged forward, pointing a finger at me. This is your fault. You manipulated her, didn't you? You turned her against me. Admit it, Clara. The room was buzzing, everyone whispering, some watching in shock, others in thinly veiled delight. But me? I stayed quiet, calm. For once, I didn't need to defend myself. Mom had spoken for me. Emma collapsed into a chair, shaking with rage, while Dad sat frozen, unable to look at me. And in that moment, surrounded by gasps and accusations, I realized something powerful. For years, I was the forgotten daughter, the overlooked one, the failure, but now I was the heir, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence after the lawyer's words felt heavier than the coffin we had just buried. I sat frozen, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me. $3.4 million. Properties, the foundation. Me, the daughter no one believed in. Emma's voice shattered the silence. This is ridiculous. She was delusional. Everyone knows I was Mom's favorite. She would never... The lawyer interrupted gently but firmly. Miss Whitmore, the documents are clear. This will has been reviewed by the court. It is legally binding, Emma's face twisted in rage. No, you're lying. She must have been tricked. Clara did this. She put ideas in Mom's head. Her accusations stabbed at me, but instead of bleeding, I felt oddly calm. For once, I didn't need to explain myself. The truth was already written in black and white, signed by Mom's own hand. I looked at Emma, this sister who had spent our whole lives towering over me, and I saw her differently. Not as the untouchable golden child, but as someone crumbling under the weight of losing control. Dad finally spoke, his voice low but sharp. This doesn't make sense. Clara, tell me, did you convince her to do this? I met his eyes that had always glanced past me, never truly on me. And I said the words I had been holding inside for years. No, Dad, I didn't convince her. I didn't need to. She made her choice. Because she saw the truth. Gasps echoed around the room. Some guests nodded, as if silently admitting they'd noticed it too. The years Emma hadn't been there. The nights I'd carried Mom through her illness. Emma shot to her feet, trembling with fury. You don't deserve a dime of that money. You've never done anything with your life, Clara. You're nothing. Her words stung, but not like they used to. Because this time, I could feel Mom's presence in the lawyer's words. This time, I knew I wasn't nothing. The lawyer closed his briefcase. My job here is done. The court will oversee the transfer of assets. Good day. And just like that, he was gone, leaving behind a storm that was only beginning. Emma stormed out of the hall, slamming the doors so hard the chandeliers rattled. Dad followed her, muttering angrily under his breath. The rest of the family lingered in clusters, whispering like vultures circling fresh prey. I sat alone at the table, staring at my untouched plate of food, hands trembling. 3.4 million, an estate. A foundation. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. I felt overwhelmed. Afraid even. But underneath all that fear, buried deep in my chest, there was a spark. A tiny ember of something I had never felt before. Power. For the first time in my life, the family couldn't ignore me. They couldn't laugh me away or brush me aside. Mom had made sure of that. As I rose from the table and walked out of the hall, whispers followed me. Why, Clara? Do you think she deserves it? Maybe Margaret finally saw the truth. I kept my head high, my steps steady. Let them whisper. Because this was only the beginning. The days after the funeral were a blur. Meetings with lawyers. Stacks of paperwork. Bank transfers. Property deeds with my name printed boldly across the top. It felt unreal. Like I had stepped into someone else's life. One morning, I stood in front of the Whitmore estate. A sprawling 2-story home with ivy crawling up the stone walls and windows that seemed to stare back at me. My childhood home. The house where I had always felt small, overlooked, and now it was mine. I should have felt triumphant. But honestly, I felt like an imposter walking through those doors. My footsteps echoed in the halls as if asking, "Do you really belong here?" In the study, Mom's scent still lingered. Lavender and old books. On her desk sat a sealed envelope with my name written in her delicate handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Clara, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I want you to know that I saw you. I saw the nights you stayed up with me, the patience, the love, the sacrifices no one else noticed. I gave you this inheritance not as a reward, but as a recognition. You have always been enough. Use this gift to build the life you deserve. And remember, strength doesn't come from proving others wrong. It comes from knowing your own worth. Love always, Mom. Tears blurred my vision as I held the letter to my chest. For the first time in years, I felt validated, seen. But that peace didn't last long, because Emma wasn't done. 2 days later, I woke up to a barrage of phone calls. Unknown numbers. Family members I hadn't heard from in years. Reporters even. Emma had gone public. She told everyone I manipulated Mom into changing the will. She painted me as a greedy daughter who preyed on her mother's illness. The headlines were cruel. Bitter sister steals inheritance. Whitmore fortune falls into wrong hands. And it didn't stop there. Emma herself showed up at the estate, pounding on the door, screaming for me to come out. "You don't deserve any of this," she shrieked, her voice echoing across the driveway. "You think money makes you important? You're still nothing, Clara. Nothing!" I stood inside, clutching Mom's letter in my hand, my body trembling. The old me would have hidden, maybe even begged her to stop. But something inside me had shifted. I didn't open the door. I didn't respond. Instead, I whispered to myself the words Mom had written. "You have always been enough." That night, as I sat at Mom's desk with the weight of the estate on my shoulders, I made a decision. I wasn't going to waste this gift drowning in fear or trying to prove myself to people who would never see me. I was going to build something. Something that couldn't be denied. And if Emma wanted a war, she had no idea who she was up against. The first thing I did with the inheritance wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a luxury car or a designer wardrobe like Emma would have done. I hired a financial advisor. Sitting in that sleek office, surrounded by charts and graphs, I felt out of place. But I forced myself to listen, to learn. Every dollar Mom left me was more than just money. It was her faith in me. I wasn't about to squander it. We set up investments, stocks, trusts, strategies, words. That once felt foreign, now felt like bricks I could use to build a foundation of my own. The second thing I did was something for myself. Something Emma never thought I'd have the courage to do. I applied for a business loan, not because I needed the money, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could stand on my own. I had always dreamed of starting a wellness center, yoga, therapy, meditation, a place where people like me, the overlooked and broken, could find healing. And with Mom's inheritance as collateral, I didn't just get approved. I got respect. For the first time, bankers and lawyers shook my hand like I mattered, like I was someone worth listening to. But of course, Emma wasn't going to let me have that peace. She filed a lawsuit, claimed I coerced Mom into signing the will, accused me of elder abuse. The first time the papers were served, I thought my knees would give out. The humiliation, the rage. It was like being dragged back into the shadows I had just crawled out of. But then I remembered something. Emma was desperate. She wasn't fighting for Mom's memory. She was fighting for control, and I refused to give it back, my lawyer reassured me. The will was airtight. The medical records proved Mom was of sound mind when she signed it. Emma's case was weak. Still, she tried everything. Interviews, social media rants, calling me a thief, a manipulator, a parasite. The old me would have crumbled under the weight of her words. But this new me, I let her scream. I let her flail. Because while she was busy burning her energy trying to destroy me, I was busy building something that couldn't be touched. The wellness center opened quietly 6 months later in a renovated brick building downtown. The sign above the door read, "The Haven." The first day, only 3 people walked in. But by the end of the month, we had 50 members. By the end of the year, hundreds. And when I stood in the opening ceremony, cutting the ribbon with shaky hands, I felt Mom's presence again. I imagined her smile, her soft voice whispering, "You have always been enough." Emma didn't show up, of course. She was too busy plotting, but little did she know. Every brick in that building, every person who walked through those doors, was proof that I was no longer her shadow. I was my own light. And for Emma, nothing was more terrifying than watching the failure she mocked her whole life rise higher than she ever imagined. By the time fall rolled around, things had shifted in ways I couldn't have predicted. For years, my family had lived in a bubble where they assumed I was beneath them, where my hard work was invisible, and their own superior lives were the only ones worth acknowledging. But that bubble was cracking, and I was finally starting to see the pieces fall. One Saturday morning, I got a call from Mrs. Evans, the retired teacher who ran the local community center. "Sweetheart," she said warmly, "I was wondering if you'd be willing to come talk to our Young Entrepreneurs Club. These kids need someone who understands starting from scratch, who knows how to face rejection and keep going. And honestly, there's no one better than you." My throat tightened. Me. The girl who my own mother once said would never measure up was now being asked to inspire others. I agreed. Of course, and the following week, I stood in front of 20 teenagers with bright eyes and notebooks in hand. I told them the truth. About late nights working double shifts, about the times my family laughed when I mentioned my dreams, and about how success doesn't come overnight. It comes from resilience. When I finished, the room erupted into applause. A few kids even stayed after, asking how they could intern with my business. That moment gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing: validation from strangers when family had failed me. But my family wasn't gone from the picture. Oh no, because the higher I climbed, the more desperate they became. One Sunday, I was at my apartment, finally enjoying a quiet brunch, when my phone lit up with my brother's name. I hesitated, staring at the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me whispered, "Take it. See what he wants, hello?" I said flatly. His voice came through all fake cheer. "Hey sis, long time no talk. We should catch up," I nearly laughed. "Catch up?" The last time we'd spoken, he had called me pathetic. I kept my tone cool. "I'm busy. What do you need?" He sighed dramatically as if I were the one being difficult. "Look, I'll be straight with you. Things aren't going so great right now. The housing market's a mess, and I made a few risky investments. There it was, and I asked, knowing exactly where this was heading. "And," he continued, lowering his voice like it was some grand confession, "I heard you're doing really well. Maybe you could help me out a little, just until things stabilize." I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding with equal parts rage and satisfaction. This was the same brother who had mocked me, stolen opportunities, and paraded his success in front of me. Now he wanted a handout? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "You know what's funny? When I was struggling, you told me I was weak. You said I'd never amount to anything. And now you're calling me for help? That's rich," he sputtered, his voice rising. "I'm your brother. Family helps family." The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. Family helps family. Where was that sentiment when I was working 2 jobs to survive while they mocked me? I stayed calm. Family helps family if family treats each other with respect. You didn't. Goodbye. And I hung up. I sat there, staring at my silent phone, realizing this was just the beginning. If my brother was cracking, the rest of the family wouldn't be far behind. Because here's the thing. The moment people who built their pride on your supposed failures see you succeed, they either cheer for you or they scheme to use you. And my family? Oh, they were definitely scheming. It didn't take long for the next act of desperation to arrive. A week after my brother's pathetic phone call, I got a message from my mom. Not a text, not a voicemail. An actual handwritten letter shoved into my mailbox. That alone told me how calculated it was. She wanted it to feel sentimental, like some heartfelt olive branch. The envelope was cream-colored with my name written in her perfect looping script. For a moment, I just stared at it, my stomach tight. Then I opened it. Inside was a 2-page letter, dripping with guilt-laced manipulation. My dearest daughter, it began. I know things haven't always been easy between us, but family must stand together. Your cousin's in trouble. She needs surgery and your aunt and uncle are struggling. We thought maybe since you're doing well now you'd want to help. After all, we've always supported you in our own way. I nearly dropped the paper. Supported me? My family had laughed at me, mocked me, excluded me from dinners and vacations. That was their idea of support? The kicker came at the end. Think of this as an opportunity to show that you still value family, even if we've had our differences. A true daughter would never turn her back. A true daughter. Those words burned into me. It wasn't about my cousin. It wasn't about help. This was my mother's way of pulling me back under her thumb, of testing whether I could be guilted into serving them again now that I finally had something they wanted. I folded the letter slowly, slid it back into the envelope, and set it on the counter. My first instinct was anger, slam my fist, curse out loud, shred the thing into pieces. But instead, I sat quietly, because anger was exactly what they wanted. They wanted me so tangled in emotion that I'd bend. No, not this time. The following evening, I called my mom directly. She answered quickly, almost too quickly, like she'd been waiting by the phone. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice honeyed. "Did you get my letter?" "I did," I said evenly. "And I want to be clear. If my cousin truly needs help, there are charities, hospitals, and payment plans. You could have asked me respectfully, explained the situation, and I might have considered. But instead, you chose to shame me, to tell me what a true daughter would do." There was silence on the other end. Then a sharp inhale. "You've changed," she hissed, the sweetness gone. "You think money makes you better than us?" I swallowed hard, keeping my voice steady. "No, Mom, money didn't change me. You did. Every insult, every time you made me feel small, it built me into the woman I am today. And you don't get to demand pieces of my success just because you share my blood." Her voice trembled, furious now. "You'll regret this. Family always comes first." And then she hung up. I stared at my reflection in the dark phone screen, my pulse racing. But beneath the adrenaline, something else sparked in me, clarity. For the first time, I fully saw it. They didn't just want me back in the family circle. They wanted me under them again, controlled, useful only as long as I was serving their needs. But here's the twist they hadn't anticipated. I wasn't that girl anymore. Not only was I stronger, I was finally ready to stop playing defense and start playing offense. If they wanted a game, I was going to give them one. By the time winter came, I was done waiting for the next guilt trip, the next fake emergency, the next insult wrapped in family sugarcoating. I had spent my whole life reacting to them, ducking, defending, surviving. But now, I was ready to end this cycle on my own terms, and the opportunity came gift-wrapped. My cousin, the same one they claimed needed money for surgery, was having a massive engagement party. A hotel ballroom, a guest list in the hundreds, champagne fountains, and of course my family was parading it like a royal wedding. Against all logic, I received an invitation. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but then it clicked. They wanted me there for show. The black sheep daughter they could flaunt now that I had some success, so they could bask in reflected glory and pretend they'd always supported me. I smiled when I read it. Perfect. The night of the party, I walked into that glittering ballroom in a sleek black gown. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even before I reached my table, I could feel it, the shift in the air. The girl they once mocked as aimless had arrived like she owned the place. My mother spotted me first. She plastered on a wide smile, her hand clutching my father's arm as if to steady herself. "Darling, you came!" She gushed loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "We were just telling everyone how proud we are of you." Proud. The word nearly made me laugh out loud, but I played along. I hugged her lightly, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. Tonight I'll give you exactly what you want." As dinner wrapped up, the DJ tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the bride's cousin would like to say a few words." All eyes turned to me. My mother's smile faltered. This wasn't planned. I walked to the stage, heels clicking against polished marble, heart pounding but steady. I took the mic and looked out at a sea of curious faces, family, friends, even distant acquaintances who had witnessed years of my humiliation through whispers. "Good evening," I began, my voice calm. When I got this invitation, I wasn't sure why. My family and I haven't exactly been close. In fact, I let the pause linger. They've spent most of my life making sure I knew I wasn't enough. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My mother stiffened. My brother clenched his jaw, and my father looked ready to bolt. I continued. "But here's the thing about being underestimated. It forces you to grow stronger in silence, to build when no one is watching. And now I stand here with a company of my own, employees I treat like family, and a life I carved out without their help." Gasps, whispers, a few stunned looks from relatives who had no idea. I leaned forward slightly, voice sharper now. "So tonight I want to say thank you. Thank you for the cruelty, the exclusion, the laughter at my expense. Because every single slight built me into the woman standing before you. Without your rejection, I would not have succeeded. You thought you were breaking me, but you forged me." Silence. Pin drop silence, then applause. Real, thunderous applause from strangers in the room who saw courage where my family only saw defiance. I handed the mic back, walked off the stage, and returned to my seat, leaving my mother pale, my father stone-faced, and my brother fuming, and for the first time in my life I felt no shame, no guilt, just freedom. As I sipped my champagne, I realized revenge doesn't always come with flames and fury. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is living so fully, so unapologetically, that those who tried to bury you are forced to sit in the front row and watch you rise. And I had risen. This was my story, my victory, my peace. So, to anyone listening who has been dismissed, belittled, or cast aside by their own family, remember this. You don't have to prove them wrong. You only have to prove yourself right. And when you do, trust me, they'll see it. They'll feel it. And you won't even need to look back.